Welcome to our second session for the course on agroecology, science and practice. I am Dr. Tadeo Kahigwa Tevasima, a lecturer at Mountains of the Moon University in the Faculty of Agriculture. In the previous session, we had looked at the definition of an ecosystem, and we had also looked at the definition of ecology. And in the ecosystem, we looked at the total sum. So now we come to the agroecosystem. An ecosystem managed with the intention of producing, distributing, and consuming food, fuel, and fiber is what we would generally term as an agroecosystem. It's not only about production, it's also about distribution, consumption of both food, fuel, and fiber. This has been put forward by Cabell and Olfos in 2012. And this addresses the challenge that is being put at the forefront as opposed to agroecology. It's always coming in the discourses on if agroecology or organic agriculture can feed the world. But here is one key issue. It's about distribution that is maybe not being addressed well through the conventional agricultural systems. So food distribution is as key as its production, because we have people who are undernourished, but at the same time in the same world we have obesity as a problem. We have food management of wasted food as a problem in one continent, whereas there is hunger and malnutrition in another continent. So distribution of food is a very key aspect when it comes to agroecology. And agroecology is basically the application of ecological concepts and principles to the design and management of sustainable agroecosystems. We are going to look at these concepts and principles and how they can be applied. So when we look into the natural system, we see that there is a way one ecosystem produces another in a process which we call succession. And it is this succession that we have to manage so as to be able to mimic nature and hence attain resilience and sustainability. Agroecology is also defined as a scientific discipline, agricultural practice, or a political or social movement. And in these three broad categories, we look at agroecology communicating to the three key aspects of sustainability: the economic sustainability, ecological sustainability, and social sustainability. When we talk about agroecology as a science, we are talking about the co-creation of knowledge in which both scientific and indigenous knowledge are integrated to produce a localized knowledge or solution to challenges that is embedded in a local situation, and so being adoptable and being able to provide solutions in both space and time. When we look at the practice, these include both the already known sustainable farming practices, but also the new ones that are produced through the scientific aspect of agroecology. And when we talk about the social movement, we are talking about issues to do with governance of food systems, issues to do with marketing, issues to do with the pricing of commodities and having a fair way of distribution of resources that can ably keep the producers of our food, fiber, and fuel running without necessarily being heavily indebted and eventually running out of the possibilities of putting food on our table. Agroecological practices are aimed at producing significant amounts of food through a process that integrates ecological processes and ecosystem services as a fundamental elements, and which does not simply rely on ordinary techniques. Here, when we talk about ordinary, we are talking about something that is just created for the sake of solving one problem without looking at the whole. And when I talk about the whole, I mean the entire system. We have talked about the production system itself as being composed of several elements: the soil, the animals, the plants, but also the social aspects. And so, when we look at ordinary techniques like the reliance on pesticides, for example, it's just looking at kill a particular pest, and then you hope that without that pest destroying the crop, you are going to have a better production. But at the same time, that pesticide is also destroying the soil and therefore is compromising the fertility of the soil, and in the end could actually cause more harm to the crop than the pest. So when we talk about agroecological practices, these are practices that look at the whole system and are able to sustain the different elements of the system, including the soil, the crops, the animals, and if you want to say the humans also being part of the animals, but also their ability to manage how these components of the system are in constant interaction. Some of the agroecological practices that I would like to mention at this point include biofertilizers. So we have synthetic fertilizers, but these are not sustainable in a sense that economically they cannot be afforded by smallholder farmers, but also they cause destruction on the micro and macro living organisms in the soil and also alter the soil pH. So instead of having these synthetic fertilizers, we can rely on biofertilizers. These are nature-based and they certainly nourish the soil, the life in the soil. We also have natural pesticides, and these are extracted from plants. So they could repel the pest without necessarily killing it, and they do not cause any harm to both the human and the soil. We have crop choice and rotations. It's one of the agroecological practices. Instead of forcing a crop to adapt to a certain ecosystem, it is better to identify a crop that fits within that ecosystem And then when we have a certain combination of different crops to rotate them, so as to break the cycles of pests, but also to nourish the fertility of the soil through these crop residues. Intercropping is an old practice, but it is agroecological in a way that it actually promotes diversity and resilience. And also with intercropping, we can have relay intercropping. We have agroforestry, which can be practiced in different ways. Planting of allelopathic plants, which can control pests and weeds. There are several plants that will produce exudants that can actually inhibit the growth of weeds, but also can repel pests. We have the integration of semi-natural landscape elements at field and farm level, or their management at landscape. When we talk about landscape, we are talking beyond the farm, but we are talking about an integration of several farms, the water systems, the rivers, what is happening above the ground. So when we look at an integrated approach towards this, avoiding pollution of the atmosphere, all such practices are agroecological. Reduced tillage, sometimes called minimum tillage, is also a key practice in agroecology, and we shall be looking at all these practices in detail. Direct seeding, drip irrigation, biological pest control, alongside integrated pest management. Now, in the first session, we were talking briefly why agroecology, science and practice, and we were talking about some of the constraints that have resulted into the need for integrating the science and the practice. These constraints that have driven that need are related with the failure to balance the three aspects of sustainability. As I mentioned earlier, we have the economic, ecological, and social sustainability. Given that majority of the producers of our food are smallholder farmers, they are therefore constrained. And even when we talk about ecological sustainability, without economic sustainability, the adoption of such practices becomes limited, because one element of sustainability can actually constrain another. But there is also the challenge of productivity on smallholder farms, which are related with the transportation being limited due to rural settings. We have institutional constraints. Among these, there is also the limited advisory services to the farmers, but also there is limited access to credit, which actually builds into the constraint of economic sustainability. Other constraints include with the increasing population, the climate variability, farm sizes are decreasing, especially due to increase in population, but also some other large farms with land grabbing are taking over the smallholder farms. Soil is being degraded due to continuous cultivation with limited nourishment of the nutrients. Food insecurity and malnutrition, and also other issues to do with gender. Now, to address some of these constraints, but also to get more knowledge and insights about these constraints, we have databases that contain this information at both local and international level. And in our next session, we shall be looking at some of these databases and the information that they can provide to us in relation to addressing the constraints which agroecology is geared towards addressing. Thank you for participating in this session. Looking forward to having you in the next session.